Welcome to Expats Everywhere. Can you tell us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Kate. I am originally from Victoria, Canada, so it's on the west coast, just outside of Vancouver. And I have been living abroad in Spain, the UK, and Sweden since 2015.
Okay, so Sweden, what city do you live in?
I currently live in the capital of Stockholm, Sweden.
And what's it like living there?
I love Sweden and I love Stockholm. If you've ever been to the West Coast, it has such a Canadian West Coast feel. So I feel right at home despite not knowing the language. But it's a really beautiful city. It's not a huge capital. There's about 6 million people who live here. So in terms of a mega city, it's not exactly one, but it has absolutely everything that you could ever hope for in a big city.
You mentioned something about the language. Can you get by with just speaking English?
Yes. So that's one of the best things about Stockholm. Everyone speaks English and they speak it fluently. Since moving here, I think I've met one person who I couldn't talk to in English. So it's been so easy. They switch to it so naturally, and they're actually really polite about it and love practicing their English. So it's probably one of the easiest places to live as a English speaker.
Okay, that's great. So, what do you do in Stockholm?
So in Stockholm, I work for myself as a freelance writer, a graphic designer, and then I also run a blog on the side.
Okay, and do you have any other friends who are expats who have different jobs?
Yeah, so they're basically in Stockholm, there's any job you can hope for. As I said, it's a big city, so I have friends working in anything from retail to friends working as researchers at large global corporations. Um, Basically, anything you want to do, you can do in Stockholm.
What does a typical day look like for you?
So as a freelancer, I don't really have a typical day. It sort of depends what projects have come down the pipe, what I'm working on. My ideal day starts with coffee, where I can get up, sort of see what the weather's doing, check in on the news back home and both here, and then sort of get started. I generally spend a lot of my mornings writing. I like to take a break midday to do some yoga, just to get a little stretching in because when you sit for so long, it can be tiresome. And then in the afternoon, I often like to get out and explore the city, explore some of my neighborhood, or maybe just run some errands.
Okay, so as far as salaries go, what would be a good salary for Stockholm?
A good salary for Stockholm would range probably anything above 30,000 kroners per month. Stockholm is quite an expensive city, but at the same time, people are paid quite well. So 30,000 a month does sound like a lot, but here it's enough to get by and sort of live comfortably.
And what kind of lifestyle could you live on that?
I would say you could live very comfortably on 30,000 kroner a month. Stockholm is, as I said, quite an expensive city. Rental prices can be quite high. So depending on where you want to live, you can either live really, really well or, as I said, quite comfortably, whether you live in a trendier part of town.
So if someone is making 30,000 kroner, do you think that they would have the ability to save any of that?
I think depending on where you live and sort of how much you pay in rent would be the biggest factor. Whether or not you love to go out, because again, as I said, Stockholm is really expensive, especially when it comes to like going out for drinks or meals with friends. So depending on what kind of lifestyle you want to live, there is the chance to save money on that salary. But if you're someone who really likes to go out all the time, you may be, cutting it a little tight at the end of the month.
Okay, so let's just say someone has a job and they're getting ready to move there. How much money should they bring with them to get started?
I would definitely say you should try to save up 3 months of what your expected expenses would be. So in terms of kroners, you probably would want to have about 90 to 120,000 kroners. That would be enough to definitely get you started. You could rent a nice apartment in a nice part of town. It would also give you a little bit of flexibility to, join some clubs, which is always an important thing when you move to a new city. And it also gives you that reassurance that if you don't have a job right away, you won't go broke. So.
And what should someone pack? Like, what's the weather like there?
So the weather in Stockholm, it's a northern country, so you can expect cold winters. I'm from Canada, so I was expecting snow and was actually surprised at how late the snow started this year, at least. But we've regularly had snow on the ground since about December. The temperatures aren't super, super cold. I think it's dipped down to -10 Celsius, and that's been the lowest so far. But definitely pack for warmth. So a good coat, a good scarf, and a good hat is always important. Gloves are always good. But the temperatures in the spring, the fall, and the summer are higher, as one would expect. So you definitely need to pack a range of things. Shorts for summer, jeans are always good, and good waterproof shoes is definitely a must.
Is there anything that you can't find in Stockholm that you wish you could get regularly?
Stockholm has pretty much everything that you could hope for. I mean, there's lots of H&Ms, lots of clothing stores. They love to shop here. But one of the things that I do miss from home, and it's a little bit embarrassing, is Kraft macaroni and cheese. It's one of those weird staples that, you ate occasionally at home, but it's like a nice comfort food, and you just cannot seem to find it here. We have found it once when we were living in Europe, but it was so expensive that it just wasn't, that cheap, nice staple. So it's usually like the food stuff that I tend to miss from home because they just don't have those same brands or the same style here.
So when you go back to Canada, do you throw a bunch of that stuff in your suitcase and stock up?
We haven't yet, but we have had people mail it to us, which was quite a funny birthday gift to get one year. It was a box of Kraft dinner. So my boyfriend and I totally appreciated it. And we probably ate Kraft dinner for 3 days straight, which is embarrassing as someone in their late 20s, but it was totally worth it and we loved it. So.
That's funny. Okay, let's change gears a little bit. How safe is Stockholm, and do you feel safe there?
As far as I know, Stockholm is incredibly safe. I have never felt unsafe walking around at any time of day, by myself, in the city, outside the city. I think it's one of the safest places I have ever lived, and I've never felt uncomfortable anywhere.
And is the rest of Sweden like that?
I think so. Most of the people live in the south, either in Stockholm or on the other coast in Malmo. Like any city, there are going to be some bad apples and, some people who do some not so nice things. But in general, I think the city is incredibly safe, and the country as well.
Okay. So how do you meet people there?
So meeting people is a little bit difficult. Swedes are quite reserved. So it does take a little while to actually sort of break into friend groups and sort of establish like a more social network here. The biggest thing I've learned since moving abroad is that you need to join clubs and groups. It's the easiest way to meet people, and immediately you're finding people with a similar interest. So here in Sweden in the winter, my boyfriend and I joined a curling club, which we had curled at home and we just thought it would be funny to do it here. It happened to find a group. And so that was a really good way of meeting people. It was nice to have one night a week where you could go do something social, do something active. And then, it's always just funny to chat about curling afterwards. In addition to that, I also have joined a yoga studio. So it's nice to have that outlet to go and meet people. It's a really social studio as well, so you can kind of just go and hang out. But it's been a great way of meeting people who have a similar interest and, that type of thing.
Okay, and what other things do you do for fun?
Other things we do for fun, it's like anywhere else, going out for dinner, hanging out with friends. As I said earlier, Stockholm is a bit expensive, so it tends to be a little bit more pick up some wine and have a game night with some of our friends and colleagues, but it's still really nice just to get out with people. Exploring the city is also really nice. Stockholm has so much green space, and Swedes are really active. So you can go basically anywhere and go walking. In the winter, you can go cross-country skiing a lot, and there's parks set up for it. So it's just fun to get out and explore the city on weekends and in the evenings.
Okay, can you give us an idea if someone, like let's just say a couple wants to go out for a fairly nice meal and get some drinks, like how much can they expect to spend?
So I will give this number in Canadian dollars just because it's how my credit card charges me. But yeah, definitely expect to spend no less than $100. We have on occasion gone out for drinks where it has been a glass of wine and a draft beer, and that's come to about 30 Canadian. Wow. So that was at a nice place with a really nice view, but we were still taken aback because it's just not what you expect for, such basic beverages. However, on the flip side, there are places in Stockholm that do sort of more of the, we'll say, student rates for beers and stuff like that. So it is an expensive city, but it's not all astronomically expensive. So if you know the right places, you can get a good meal and beer for fairly cheap.
let's talk about the healthcare there. If you had to get a procedure or a big surgery done there, would you feel comfortable doing that?
Yeah, definitely. They have very high standards here, and if their hospitals are anything like their streets, they're going to be very clean and very efficiently run. So I would 100% feel comfortable, going to the doctor or going into a hospital here.
All right, and would you say that Stockholm is a good travel hub?
Yeah, Stockholm is a good travel hub. It's a city with 4 airports, although 2 of them, it's kind of a stretch to say they're actually in Stockholm. But you can fly so many places in Europe, and for quite inexpensively as well, which is really nice and one of my favorite things about living in Europe. So yeah, like there's tons of travel opportunities, whether you want to go to Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, or even Asia or North America. It always seems like there's an option to take a trip from here.
And are prices pretty good for flights?
As I said, there's the 4 airports. So it depends what airport you fly from. There's 2 of them that are sort of the hubs for the low-cost air carriers, and I've booked a flight from Poland for like $14 Canadian, so not bad that way. Like you can get some pretty cheap deals. You just have to be willing to travel about 80 minutes outside the city center to get it. So, it's worth it. The bus ride's not bad, so.
Okay, so things like bus rides and taxis, are those expensive or are those reasonable?
So taxis are quite expensive in Sweden. However, the transit here is so good. You do pay a little bit more for it, but the pass, it takes you all over the city. I think you can go like an hour and a bit north and south along the metro. There's trams, buses, and your ticket basically covers all of them. If you come in the summer, you can also use your transit pass to take the ferries around, which is kind of a nice novel experience. So yeah, travel can be expensive, but it's really efficient. It's really fast, runs regularly, and I have no complaints about it. I've lived in other big cities where the transit hasn't run half as well as this, so I feel that it's definitely worth the cost.
Do you pay just a flat monthly rate or it's like a pay-as-you-go recharge?
All of the above. It can be a monthly pass. You can also buy for 3 months, which a little bit more cost effective, but spending a lot up front. If you're only here for a few days, there's you can buy per ride, per day, per 3 days, per week. So there's a lot of options to use the public transit. And as I said, it covers so much of the city that there's almost no reason not to use it.
Okay, lastly, what would you say are some pros and cons of living in Stockholm?
So pros of living in Stockholm, the city is so beautiful. There's tons of green space, lots of parks, and there's something called the access to nature. So you can kind of go wander like basically wherever you want, as long as you're not like trampling through someone's garden. So that I think is one of the huge pros of living here. It's really nice to get outside. Pros, everyone speaks English, which is a really great thing if you're not someone who speaks another language, or you're moving to Sweden and don't speak Swedish, because let's be honest, not a lot of us who don't live here don't speak Swedish. So I think that's really good. I also would say they have really good programs to help integrate people into society. So if you are here in Stockholm, at least, and you're going to be here for a while, there are actually free programs that will help you learn Swedish. They're a little bit intense, but it's a great way of getting to know the language and, again, meeting new people. And, if you live in Sweden, I mean, why not learn how to say the basics and sort of get by in Swedish? Some of the cons, I would say, it is a bit expensive, but if you're in the system, I don't think you notice the expenses as much because things do cost more, but the taxes go towards, healthcare and maintenance of roads and those types of things. I would also say one of the cons is they do get winter, and they do get winter in, if you're not from somewhere that experiences a lot of snow, it can be a bit of a shock. The other shock I would say is how dark it gets. We don't get midnight sun here, but it's, I would say, not far off. In the winter, the sun was rising at probably about 8 o'clock in the morning, and it would start to set at 3, which at first was a bit of a novelty. And then after a while, you were like, yeah, I just want to see some daylight. That would be nice. So that would be one of the cons. But on the whole, I would say the pros definitely outweigh the cons of living here. I mean, the people are nice. It's really beautiful. It's close to a lot of really interesting places. And yeah, it's just a great experience of living in Sweden.
Well, awesome. Kate, thank you so much for telling us about Stockholm today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.